the most powerful truths are the things that you know to be true, but you're told by people are not. And so I think of the most obvious sacred cow in all of sales, which is the linear funnel, right? And I think that's drummed into so many people that people stop thinking about it. When the reality is, if any of us look at how we've bought stuff, the buyer's journey is fundamentally nonlinear. And so the funnel is such a creation of businesses' needs and their needs to put their process above their buyers. So it's very strange that we do all this stuff not to serve our buyers, but to check off our own arbitrary checklists. When it comes to closed circuits selling, I think that idea of continuity in a closed loop is such a powerful idea.
Welcome back to the B2B Playbook, where we believe that great go-to-market is built on people, not platforms. Today, we are joined by Charles Needham, a multi-talented star of the Outbound world. With a career that began in finance across structured products and private equity, Charles brings a level of analytical discipline to sales that most go-to-market teams have never experienced. He's the author of the book Cold Call Algo, the AI-powered cold call system that breaks through, books fast, and dominates pipeline. Co-authored with Justin Michael. He has a Quant's mindset applied to the messy human world of revenue. So today we are incredibly excited to have him on the show, together with, of course, Adem Manderovic, co-founder of CRO School and creator of Closed Circuit Selling. We're going to explore how Outbound is evolving, why frameworks alone no longer just cut it, and how architecture, not just activity, defines the next era of sales performance. Charles, thank you so much for joining us.
George, Adam, thank you for having me. That sounds very cool in an Australian accent. I'm hopeful I can hire you to follow me around and do that full time, or at least part time.
Yeah, absolutely. Part-time is fine. Anytime you walk into a building, we'll announce that. We could probably set it as your alarm if you want to wake up to that in the morning too.
Bruce Buffer, who?
And Adam, yeah, go on, Adam.
I was going to say, George may not have told you, I cold call companies and tell, have you heard of the world's best marketer?
That's a great opener right there.
You know, he actually does. He literally cold calls people and asks them if they've heard of the world's best marketer, George Coudounaris. He sends me recordings of him doing it, and I die from embarrassment.
That's pretty awesome, and probably a good segue into our first topic. What happens from there? So they say, why are you asking me? Where do you go from there?
Exactly right. It just opens up the conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm just curious where it goes from there. Tell me, Adam. I don't know.
Yeah. No, in fairness, most of them have. We've got a little bit of a following for this podcast, especially these collaborations, and I don't take anything away from George's wizardry. So I'm just one voice telling the truth to people out there.
Are you sure most of them don't say, no, who the hell is that?
I guess if they do, there's no evidence of that. No, I'm kidding. Just a good icebreaker, that's all.
For sure.
Yeah. Love it. And takes the pressure off you. The focus is on me. Marketing's happy to be sales' punching bag. Absolutely. No trouble at all.
I think that's you guys' official responsibilities, right? As far as I understand.
Yes. The deeper I get into the sales world, that's what I'm realizing, Charles and Adam, is marketing is officially sales' punching bag, especially in the SaaS world.
Well, who else are we going to blame for leads not closing?
Well,
ourselves? That's crazy.
But it can't be your fault, right? The way that you're comped, It's not your fault that these deals aren't closing, is it? Anyway, we'll get to that. Charles, I want to start by talking about you first. It's not all about Adam and I. Well, a lot is about Adam. It ultimately all comes back down to Adam, but we can't help that. I mean, look at him. He's a male model. Look at his hair.
Look at that hair.
The guy's, yeah, it's incredible. But Charles, look, you have a pretty unique entry point, I think, to the world of Outbound. You began your career in finance, private equity. Do you feel like that analytical foundation shaped the way that you think about and approach Outbound?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I think, you hear interviews with people who are in outbound sales and in sales, and they always have the great childhood story, right? I sold, candy in school, lemonade stand. I was none of that. Zip. I was in the library reading books. I didn't play much in the way of sports. And so I was always very, very bookish. And sales was kind of like a dirty word for me, right? Like there's that negative association that came with sales. And so I went to school. I got my degree in economics. And my first job out of school was, if you've seen The Big Short, the managing essentially the actual loans that underlie these massive mortgage bonds. So you would have like, 10, 20,000 mortgages inside of one of these bonds. And somebody was responsible for essentially maintaining that book and making sure that all the payments happened on time, like coordinating with all the different counterparties, maintaining the documentation. That very, very early on, I was trained to think in terms of relational databases, where it was like, okay, in a portfolio, you have assets. Each asset is comprised of, these documents. This is where you check the payment flows. How do you go through and use databases to map all this out? And so then when I got to sales and I discovered this, I was like, wait a minute, it's the same thing, except you have people and you have data points on these people. And some of these data points raise the probability that they will do business with you. And so I started thinking about that. Then I would talk to teams and I'm like, okay, like, how do you guys, and they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, what do you mean? If there are things that, when true, raise the probability that people will buy from you, doesn't it make sense to capture that? And they would be like, I guess. And I would be very, very confused by that. And it wasn't until I left finance, similar to your story, Adam, during COVID, right? Like mortgage originations went off a cliff. And I was like, you know what? If there's any skill that's going to be invariant to economic conditions, it's to be learning to sell. And what do people want to do absolutely the least? Pick up the phone. Okay. If I do the thing that people want to do the least and I do it well, then realistically, I have a kind of job security that other people don't. But when I would make cold calls, I was never trying to book meetings. And I'm very fortunate in that some of my early mentors didn't push me to book meetings. And so I would call people and I would have conversations with them and I would document what I would learn. And if it was appropriate, I would follow back up with them. And if it wasn't, I wouldn't. And for me, that was so intuitive that when I ran into people, they were like, I have to book 20 meetings this month. And I would be like, well, but what happens if the people you talk to aren't good people to book meetings with? They're like, I booked them anyway. I was like, okay, this is really getting weird. And then I stepped into the world of VC and started pulling back the curtain on that, right? And I was like, oh dear, like something is very, very wrong here. And then around that time is actually when I met you guys and I, went through closed circuit selling and I was like, this actually makes sense. Because what we're doing is we're facilitating brand and buyer awareness to problems that we can solve on their behalf. And based on where they are in that process, we should approach them differently rather than treating everybody as the same. And so I'll stop there for a minute because I think I'm going in all kinds of different directions, but I guess a decent intro, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah, a fantastic introduction to the problem. And awesome that you, when you started out, weren't so set on meetings booked, which allowed you, I think, to start to see and explore a lot of this for yourself. And Charles, I might get you to repeat what you said to us before we hit record about how you felt about closed circuit selling when you came across it, right? It's something that I think people intuitively work out or know is true themselves, right? But can't necessarily do it or aren't allowed to necessarily do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I was saying was the most powerful truths are the things that you know to be true, but you're told by people are not. And so I think of the most obvious sacred cow in all of sales, which is the linear funnel, right? Where it's like, okay, you have people at the top of the funnel, they're not brand aware. Marketing does some black magic that George knows a lot about that causes them to come to you. You run them through your 87-step qualification criteria, which they happily abide by. They move to a demo. You then get other stakeholders involved. You do negotiations and then you close them, and then that's the end of it. And I think that's drummed into so many people that people stop thinking about it. When the reality is, if any of us look at how we've bought stuff, the buyer's journey is fundamentally nonlinear, where we see things and they make an impression on us, but maybe we don't take action. And then if somebody's smart, they build on that awareness in a way that progresses at the pace of the buyer. And so the funnel is such a creation of businesses' needs and their needs to put their process above their buyers. So it's very strange that we do all this stuff not to serve our buyers, but to check off our own arbitrary checklists. So when it comes to closed circuits selling, I think that idea of continuity in a closed loop is such a powerful idea where, information that you learn from one part of the buying process benefits other departments in the company. People who are coming in who have a certain impression of the company that doesn't fit, that's information that needs to go to marketing. Hey, the people who are coming in have a different idea of our brand than we do. That's either us or it's them. But either way, the implication is across the entire organization. So anything that happens at any part of the customer journey has nonlinear feedback to the other parts, but only if you're disciplined and the organization is aligned around it. And what you guys see all the time is when things are siloed, that doesn't happen. When incentives are set up around very specific outcomes for different parts of the funnel, that doesn't happen. And so you end up losing that circuit, which I think is such a powerful metaphor.
That's why I called it that, but you've nailed it. It's super interesting because what I would see is time and time again, two of the things that you touched on there. Most of the people that are in leadership positions right now have never seen outside of every broken sales methodology that show the disconnects or the commercial fractures to the other departments. So they are so funnel focused, right? Straight, I don't mean funnel in pun, funnel in funnel vision. They don't understand that some of those methods might be very good after the fact, but what we're talking about is the architecture that happens before. So if you can qualify 3% that are ready to buy right now, you're actually rubbing up 97% of the market the wrong way. But what that also does is it reduces marketing to being a lead gen function. And it means you need more of those lead gen marketers to create that funnel of people that are mostly not going to buy from you while you're
Yep.
causing that churn. The downstream repercussion of that in terms of commercial viability is you need more marketers to service that. You need more business development people to service that wheel. And you need more customer success CSMs to hit that reactivation requirement, because there's also a pillar in between that used to exist between the AE and the CSM, which was like a presentation day where they'd run through commercial communication plans and serviceability plans to make sure that when it goes to settlement, that it becomes viable for the business to not only win, but expand. That now
Yes.
fits nowhere. So we had some pretty big names in some of our cohorts, heads of business development, that they didn't know what a communication plan handover was. They didn't know what the template was. They'd never seen a visibility plan or a serviceability plan to make sure that you weren't upside down on the contract. So that to me is scary. So if that's happening at all of the intersects across the business, the easy solve, and I know that Aaron Ross told us 5 weeks ago, George, that easy solve, and he stopped us there and he said, easy solve, haha. It is that easy, but what we see from what Charles touched on is most of the C-suite and leadership layer aren't allowed to enable that to happen because they've never seen outside of those broken models. And that's scary.
It's scary, and also I think partly a creation of low interest rate environments. People are happy to spend whatever on growth. In the process, overlook fundamental deficiencies in the process of customer acquisition. I was chart the other day about the growth in CAC payback periods. And there are some companies that are big name companies that have 36-month CAC payback periods. And I'm looking at that and I try to square it with the average life cycle of a B2B software, which is something that I got from the Connect and Sell guys and Chris Beal. And it's about 3 years. And so what that would mean is by the time somebody's churning, you've just paid back the cost of acquiring them. It's complete insanity, but you see it all the time. I think even HubSpot has like a 25 CAC payback period.
Yeah. But do you want to extend that even further, Charles? Pushback that we get from upper middle market and even enterprise, or even just at the founder level, if we talk about in the echo chamber of LinkedIn, is we can't afford to do these actions because they believe that it will take too long to scour and validate the market properly, to create whether there's a category definition for your product or service, to get product road mapping for what comes next. And my argument to them is, one, you're going to need more people to use the model that you're doing right now. And further to your point, it's actually costing you more to service the model that you're doing now for your CAC payback anyway. So why wouldn't you just
Yes.
measure twice, cut once, as my brother says in the building industry? Just do it right from the get-go. You're going to need less people across the funnel to do things better. That's going to get a better result for you and your clients, which is also probably going to get you more people that land and expand and referral and all of these things. So it's like that explosion of that understanding has been washed out of the market. And what we've now got left is the people that have never seen outside of those broken models. But do you think, Charles, that your journey with like Titan X and some of that process by being able to speak to more people gave you the ability to see through the lens of seeing through a further tenure faster than what they should be seeing? Like in terms of like you were able to see what we see faster than like I speak to some people that might have been doing business development for 10 years and they still don't see it. But you're able to see it a lot quicker. Either you're more analytically brilliant, which is probably the case, but also you're able to see it, prove it from data. Do you think that's fair?
I think I've been tremendously blessed and incredibly lucky to have had mentors who have seen that and so instilled that in me as a default belief system. So my first real B2B sales job was at Apex Revenue, which is now Titan X. But that was a system architected by Ryan Reisert, really was, I think, the fundamental architect of Apex Revenue. And his whole perspective was meetings don't matter. And he talks about that with some regularity. So, the connect and sell guys, Ryan Reisert, but basically our North Star every day was conversations.
Mhm.
And so armed with Titan X, which gave us the ability to have 25, 30% connect rates, each rep was responsible for having 30 completed conversations a day, which we defined as you get through the introduction, you deliver what amounted to a one-to-one ad widget. Hey, we talk to VPs of sale who say that they spend most of their days interviewing reps, the pressures of maintaining a hiring pipeline on top of managing their team, selling and carrying their own quota, make hiring a secondary priority, but they're still required to grow the team as part of their mandate. Is that something you run into? Right? You deliver a pain statement to understand first and foremost if the message you're delivering is even to the right audience. And by categorizing the responses you get back from that, which is some combination of yes, I do deal with that, no, that's not relevant to me, or no, I don't deal with that, you get a larger perspective on your market, which is what you guys call cataloging the market, but we just called the completions model because we would take that information and then we would deliver it to companies and go, okay, 5% of the VPs of sale we talked to said, yes, this is relevant. They'd like to take a meeting. This is good. About 30% said this isn't relevant to them right now. And based on the conversations, they suggested it was seasonality. They do most of their hiring here. So maybe there's something with these companies. And we would deliver this information. And it was very frustrating because people would come back and say, that's great, but we want more meetings. And we'd be like, yeah, I mean, this resonated with this segment of the market. So what we can do is we can find more people like this. And in the process, hopefully book more meetings because it resonates more. But value to these conversations in and of themselves, do you guys see that? And they'd be like, not really. We want more meetings. So it was just this kind of like frustrating process of going and talking to people who didn't see the value of market validation, right? To your point, but like not really being able to articulate why. It was a very interesting process just working with Ryan, working with the team, building that out at different companies that I went to after that. But yeah, I would say it's a combination of being analytical by nature So that model made sense to me, but also it's like a fish doesn't know that swimming is remarkable, right? And I was fortunate enough to be from the very first BDR role I take in that culture. Like I've never been in a role where I had a meetings quota, God forbid.
I just wanted to add, Charles, we spoke to Colin Stewart from Predictable Revenue
That was a
probably
great
6
episode.
weeks ago or
That
so.
one.
Yeah, you heard it then. So you heard Colin say himself that they basically pulled back, shut down their outbound SDR function, doing that as a service for other businesses because they were basically a victim of what the market's misinterpretation of the Predictable Revenue book was, which like everyone just took it as meetings booked as gospel, which, you know, the authors told us, both Aaron and, well, I mean, Aaron was the author, but the founders of Predictable Revenue told us wasn't the intention, that the market ran away with that message and no one wanted to buy their market validations in the same way that you're saying at Titanex. It's the same thing happened. So it's really, really interesting to hear that.
And I think in part it's there's a truth that people hear what they want to hear, right? And if you go all the way to the fish stinks from the head, and I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here, when you look at the VC model, most of the people who are responsible for investment decisions in the VC world, and I know a lot of them coming from finance, see the world entirely through the perspective of spreadsheets. And because they see the world entirely through a function of spreadsheets, they'll what I call fooled by algebra, where they're like, okay, if based on hindsight math, we booked 10 meetings and 5 of them qualified and 1 of them turned into revenue, checks notes. If I book 100 meetings, then I will have 10 sales. Go book more meetings. Right? So like they really think that way because they've never been inside the business. None of these guys have picked up a phone and made a cold call. They believe these models that they create are representative of the way businesses actually work. Of that, the customer is gone. The customer doesn't exist. It's an abstraction on a spreadsheet. And so you look at predictable revenue, and I have to believe that was part of the hijacking, where you had VCs who had these expectations in exchange for capital that were also created in a vacuum, right? Like the revenue targets that are set at the VC level have absolutely nothing to do with the market, nor the problem, nor the appetite for solving that problem. It's entirely, well, if we invest at this post money valuation, if revenue gets here and the business is valued at a multiple of that, this is the return we will get. Therefore, go do it. Demand that has nothing to do with actual market conditions or customers or solving problems for people, which is what drives enterprise.
Whereas what they should be doing, standing of how we can be more business efficient. And maybe what they need to look at is like an umbrella, more like a Miro board of if this happens, and that's why I called it closed circuit selling.
Well,
It's
but the incentive problem there, right? To the extent of like, if your stake is valued on top line revenue,
Mhm.
do you care how much you spend to get that top line revenue? No. Fundamentally good for the business. All you care about is that top line number being hit and being able to exit to the next greater fool. And so, from an incentive perspective, if you trace that down, the VP of sale who overhires is not punished. It doesn't matter so long as you hit that top line revenue number, even if your CAC is 3 years, so long as that is achieved, people are willing to write that off as the cost of doing business. The people who aren't willing to write it off are your customers. And that's what led to the poisoning of the outbound model as we know it, because they don't care about those revenue figures. What they do care about is having their problem solved and people who are responsive and care about that.
But if we actually lens out and look at it from an organizational, internal and external stakeholder point of view, right? All of their pre-existing sales methodologies cause commercial fractures that reduce other departments to be completely fractured from where the actual market intelligence is. So George can probably tell you, like, it would be a marketer's dream to have market intelligence to tell them what to work on at intervals of 3, 6, 9 months. It would be product stream to have live feedback loops from what should we do next, because these top 50 accounts have said, hey, Adam, George, Charles, if you guys get here, we could do business in 12 or 24 months. instead of that being like a backroom deal from a CEO that hasn't spoken to the market since 1998. But there's like a measurement problem across the board because that's not how the business, like they're only looking at their individual patch, which is why I wrote that stuff in 2019 saying we're going to get to a point, people, where there's going to be patch resistance because they still want their paycheck. Whether that is in VC land, whether that's where dark money pools come from, whatever that looks like, people staying in CRO roles that don't even have commercial oversight, they'll keep punching the ticket. They're not going to rock the boat. They're on 400 grand a year plus bonuses. Even if they know that it's fundamentally wrong and they're causing critical, like business to cause actual massive commercial failure, they'll still keep punching the ticket. But until you have been in those roles long enough yourself and seen the fractures across the business in that actual true oversight role, so that in my eyes and in my day, that was when I started, head of sales used to be business development, client relationship management reported to me. Payer belt and even trucking over the fence to CSM, that didn't exist. We get the account, we service the account. If you go further than that, big finance in Australia, Charles, started with you had to sell 2 sales. You need to sell a master services agreement first. And then, Charles, how often are you going out there to sell all the deals inside of the contract to all their valued employees? And once you can see things like that, it's super simple, right? Because you're, of course, going to set up the communication plan so that you guys can win and your business can be more commercially viable. But that's not how lensing anyone's looking at it that hasn't done that before. So I guess that's like why we needed to build this architecture, which I guess I just sound like a broken record after all these years. But thankfully, George puts up with me enough. I'm sure George can tell you what that gives and like how that actually gives marketing proper structure to take them out of reducing of that lead gen function. But no one has solved that problem. Like individually, they've done silo enhancement, but no one's come along and said, hey, if we do these actions as like an umbrella or a spider web or circuitry, we can actually solve business end to end. And people used to laugh at me when I used to say, the end goal needs to be end-to-end service delivery, operational excellence end to end. And like people were just like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I talking about? Like to think of it like even back, I don't know if this happened in America, Charles. Big finance in Australia used to, this is before like getting comped on meetings. You used to be able to be like a business development rep and get comped on doing like financial applications at employer level through the master services agreement. That just blew up because the details didn't matter. Like they could be fake people and the business is still paid out. So if you did that through an aggregation system, those financiers would still pay for those finance contracts. Now, is that economically viable? Did that ever go to settlement to recoup the money? No. So why don't we look at business as a whole and go, hang on, if we're doing these actions and we need this many people to do it, are we actually getting a return at settlement? Is there actually any money flow here? And they don't piece that together. It's fucking crazy. But anyway.
It is funny, right? Because I think it was Charlie Munger who said, if you show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. Think of even to go back to talking about finance, in 2008, you saw a lot of this because fundamentally what happened at the lowest level is you have mortgage originators who were paid to originate and then sell these mortgages off to somebody else. In the traditional model, if you made a mortgage, that was on your books. So if the person didn't pay back the mortgage, you cared about this very much.
Yeah.
But if you're originating to sell off, suddenly it's somebody else's problem if the mortgage doesn't pay. And so faced with overwhelming demand to issue mortgages, these originators started laxing their standards didn't hurt them because those would be written off anyway. And people who packaged the mortgages into these bonds sold them to other people who then had to carry the risk after they stripped their fee. And you look at the same thing from a business development and a sales perspective, the BDR is going, hey, I booked, they showed up. I don't give a shit. I got my commission. The AE says, well, they closed. That is now customer success's problem. Good luck, fellas. And then customer success says, well, they churned. Nobody should have sold this, and I commission anyway, so I don't care. And so who gets screwed in all of this is the customer. And to your point about breaking up the function, if you look at it from the customer perspective, there's actually no benefit to that being broken up into stages. The entire justification is, well, if we break it up, we can do more and we can make more money. Customer experience be damned. And so it all comes back to the incentives at the root of it. Charlie Munger, smart dude.
I think on top of that, Charles, and you've got marketing too, right? Who hit their MQL targets because that's how they're comp too. And I see it a lot in our demand gen program in the incubator. We have like senior marketing teams that are forced to look into like other markets that sales isn't looking at to hit their MQL targets, because you might have like, if you have like a tight overlap between sales and marketing's not going to be able to keep magically generating MQLs, right? Because you're going to exhaust that market. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep advertising in it and that you shouldn't be present, you shouldn't be top of mind in it, but it's because they're trying to get these form fills and get it for as cheap as possible that they are basically forced to hit these MQL targets. And so then they go to these other markets. And that's why you see all this research, I think it's from the B2B Institute even lately, showing that the overlap in targeting between sales and marketing, like the Venn diagram barely overlaps in most organizations. And I think, again, it's a symptom of these like totally misaligned incentives.
Yep.
So what would happen, George, in dream state if we agree that the actual measurement should be true market validation and the collection of the data points to define the category? And that would look like finding out who they're with, how they're solving the problem now, what they don't like about it. Do they audit what they're currently getting versus what's out there? How long are they in contract for? What it would take to look at those things. If we could give that to marketing, that off the table. And then we could literally go back to true market validation. The issue that we have is people that have probably come up in the last even 10 years don't know what true market validation is. So if you ask them what market validation means, I guess that their answer will be very different from the three of us on this call. That would be something like, we tested 20 accounts and we got some hypothetical answers and our CEO told us this. And my mum's sister's auntie's dog told me that they'd buy this, so I wanted it. It needs to be an evergreen process of what that data collection needs to be, and that needs to be consistent, it needs to be transparent, it needs to be systemized. But that's not what we see.
It's even better than that, right? Because you see, and I get into trouble for this all the time, my favorite is intent data.
Mm.
Where you have all these third-party signals that people pay an arm and a leg for that are what amounts to fundamentally untestable hypotheses. Where they're like, well, this person was on your website and their tech stack is this, and they clicked on this 3 times, so that's your buyer.
But
or any of these ridiculously untestable hypotheses. And I'm always just like, well, or you could call them and ask them.
Yeah.
And why
answer, and people are like, what?
And why are people buying that? I think it's because sales stopped validating the market. They stopped cataloging. So we lost the answer to the question of who was going to be in market and when, which completely messes with your forecasting. And so because they stopped that then got pushed to marketing. And then marketing had to do that lead gen process to constantly fill the pipeline so sales can find out who's ready to book a meeting with us and hopefully buy from us. And then they said, oh no, there's too much of this. We need to figure out which of these leads are actually in market and when. And marketing is now tasked to do that. And marketing doesn't have one-to-one conversations with anyone to figure that out. And so then in comes the intent data platforms and says, hey, we'll magically surface who's in market and when. And even if it were correct and true, the research is out there showing that it is highly improbable that you will win that deal if someone hasn't heard about you before they even come into market. All the research says we have to get in front of people first before they come into market if we want a good chance of them buying from us. I think it's something like 80% of buyers will choose someone from their day one list. So you need to be on that list before they actually come into market. So marketing have been like totally screwed by this whole process. I feel for sales because I think sales are completely screwed by it because of the way that they're incentivized. And that's when Adem and I realized we have no choice, Charles, but to try and tackle this issue from the top down because it's a measurement and incentives issue.
Glad you guys are doing it.
Yeah, I'd argue as well, and I'm sure Charles, even if they could solve that problem through multiple intersects of triggers and signals, you still need to have a live conversation with those people to segment the market to find out the timing signal. It doesn't just magically pop up into George's screen going, hey, if we heard from Adam and Charles today, I'd be ready to buy. That doesn't happen. You still need to solve critical timing, and if that's efficient to be mutually beneficial. The only way you're going to collect that data point is by asking them. It just gets back to, oh, we didn't know how to solve this, so we'll build this shiny thing. Oh, and if we layered that with this and we could do this. And that's why I sent you that X post, Charles, because I thought you'd piss yourself. It's all of these hypothetical things became more and more shiny objects layered up to solve the problem. When if we just went back to the fundamentals from before 2008, funnily enough, Mark Revel my mentor, just texted me a minute ago. He's the one that taught me all of this, what I amalgamated with my process from how I did it previously. This is what people did if they're just old enough to remember. And you can tie that back. If you people want to look up, Bill Pollock did this when they started Drake in Canada. Like this was in like 1958, 56. You don't quote me, I'd have to check. But this is what you did in big finance and large contract acquisition. But it's actually more efficient if you do this the right way with the right collection across industry sector, no matter what you do. Because I'll give you an example, Charles. See that guitar behind you? Where did you buy it?
So my wife actually got it for me as a Christmas present
Awesome.
one
Do
year.
you like that one?
It's a great guitar. I
Yeah.
love it.
What do you like about it the most?
Mostly that my wife bought it for me, but it plays well. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
It's reliable. I love
So,
it.
so if you were going to buy another one, Charles, would you like it to be similar to the one you already like?
In some ways, yeah. I mean, there's different features that I would probably want to have some variety when
Mm.
I play, and I'd like it to have some electronics built in. But
Mm-hmm.
other than that, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, excellent. If we could find one for you that had those electronics built in, that gave you the experience you're getting now, is that something you'd like to see?
Send the invoice. It's done.
See, catalog, baby. Like it's not. It literally doesn't matter if Charles and I are selling. Let me think of something ridiculous. A Woolworths contract for $150 million. You catalog the information. Or let's go big finance. You're doing sale and leaseback for an operational fleet for Toyota Finance. What do you need to know? You need to know who they're with, what they pay, what trucks they have. Do they have utilities? Do they have cars? Do they have buses? Do they have equipment wrapped up into that finance? How long are they with their current provider? When do you reckon that might come up? What are the key triggers that might mean they want to look elsewhere? How often do they order their current process? It's the catalog. That is market validation, right? If you don't have that, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter how big or how small it is. It's always going to be that validates if you can sell something back into that. Doing that properly also gives you what you need. So customer success aren't flying blind. You're not just throwing things over the fence. So yeah, I understand I probably sound exhausted, but it should be a business obvious no-brainer. But we just have to get them there.
I'll turn it over to George before I start going again.
No. I'm ready for you to keep going, Charles.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the topic of the signals, right? And it's like it's almost like you guys ever see those Dilbert comics about just like absurd stuff in the workplace? It's like maybe an American thing, but I was on a call we were supposed to renew with a intent data provider, and they had the CRO on there, and he goes, our predictive platform will surface the 3% ready to buy now so you don't waste time with the other 97%. I said, waste time? What do you mean? He goes, well, if they're not ready to buy today, why would you talk to them? And I'm going, dude, are you telling me that you don't view as your function educating the market on problems that you can solve for them? And so I get very touchy about this because I feel very strongly about capitalism in general, which sounds like a funny thing to say, but when I think about what's so awesome about capitalism, it's the only economic system that takes people for what they are, which is rationally self-interested people. Communism predict the needs all the way down. Socialism predicts that workers have management capabilities and can run businesses. There's all these assumptions. But with capitalism, it's basically like, hey, if you can solve other people's problems better than they're being solved today, they will give you money because they selfishly want their problem solved. So it's this incredible system where by acting in your self-interest, everybody is actually better off. But it requires being responsive to the needs of the market. And so I think of how people take outbound and they completely ignore that. And I'm like, guys, you're actually worsening this feedback loop between buyers and sellers that has given us the prosperity we have today. So the idea that anybody who's not ready to buy today is a waste of time is just abjectly, I think, disrespectful to this process that benefits all of us. And then he went on, this is even better. He said, well, what's my sales team going to do? Talk to everybody in my market? And I was like, yes. What else would they do? Like, what do you think their job is? He's like, I can't just talk to everybody. I was like, yeah, you can. What are you talking about? And this is a CRO of a large intent data provider company. So I mean, I was just blown away. And I immediately thought of both of you guys. Should have sent them to you.
Yeah, two things that you said there. One, my thoughts on CROs being fake titles. There's just logo titles now that generally haven't had any oversight, because if they had, they would have recognized we should be speaking to a wider portion of the buyer pyramid to give timing signals to marketing and product. So that's flag number one. That should be market obvious. But do you think, sorry for my number two, Charles, do you think that the answer would be, because Aaron Ross's original intent for sales development was to be a market development role, do you think that if we actually, just a few of us spearheaded calling them like market development, it would actually get through people's psyche that's been indoctrinated by the bastardization, their interpretation of Aaron's model?
I don't think that would do it outright. I think you would have to change how people are compensated. So, for example, the model we ran at Apex is we paid per completed conversation. And part of the criteria for a completed conversation was filling out what you would call market validation signals. So we had to document whether it was a yes, no, not me, not now, and then why. And if your notes were not sufficiently detailed, you would not get paid on that.
Yeah.
And so does changing the title perhaps realign the perspective? Yes. But if you started comping people on leaving accurate notes, I think the probability that they do that goes dramatically up. And you hear all the jokes about sales leaders getting after their reps about updating Salesforce. Well, the reason that reps don't do that is because they're not paid commissions to do that, right? So they're going to defer to activities where they're likely to raise their expected value versus things that may benefit somebody else. So I think it requires a radical realignment of the comp model, which has its own set of problems. But that is, I think, what fixes it at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, that's great, because we obviously have identified what George and I mathematically think that should look like to streamline across the funnel. Can I ask you an extension question, if I may? When you were there with Ryan and Christian, and what happened with those data points? Did you hand them to marketing to build out what that looked like at those critical junction points, or did you validate the product road mapping and then put that somewhere else?
Well, so recall that it was an agency, right?
Yeah.
So most of the deliverable basically was,
Went back to
hey,
them. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so it was like, hey, here's a pie chart of the distribution of the call outcomes per title. So when we spoke to VPs of sale, X percent said that somebody else at the company handles this. Y percent said, yes, this is interesting enough. I would like to continue a commercial conversation. Some other percentage said not interested. And what we would do is we would iterate the messaging and A/B test based off of the outcomes of that, right? Like we would always say the fundamental pillars, and I know you guys had Joey on: list, message, rep, follow up. That's if you have a high percentage of people saying they don't deal with it, your targeting is probably off. People say it's not relevant, but they do deal with it. Your value proposition is probably not very compelling. It's not rocket science, but it requires going in with the intention of understanding rather than booking a meeting and then using that information iteratively.
So do you then believe, obviously you believe in what we've built with closed circuit selling and then training that within the school. Do you then believe what comes next might well be further to that model on campaign basis for us to do those timing signals and product road mapping as a service as part of closed circuit on campaign for companies that don't want to learn it in-house? Because you were obviously better than everybody else in the market with how you were segmenting that with Apex, but that was still handing over the data points in those intersects to them facilitate how they want to facilitate it. But if you're also in control of what you built out to get them the outcome to customer success, I believe the next wave will be a sales floor that is a closed circuit service for those that don't want to learn it in-house.
So that's interesting, but I think in some ways wishful to the extent that you run into, and I'm sure you guys already have, internal politics.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's like, if you sell, hey, these guys are lead gen, they're going to go out and they're going to have conversations and they're going to book us meetings. Sales is like, okay, marketing is like, don't care. CS is like, don't care.
Yeah.
Whereas if you purport to come in and then deliver information that changes how marketing operates and how CS operates, suddenly your buying committee for that service expands dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you just go directly to the CEO and then he pushes you down. But even then, you have people who aren't going to play ball,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, conceptually, I think the right idea and important. I think the implementation would probably be more difficult than you would assume.
Maybe easier after George releases our book.
Probably more people would have brand awareness.
Marketing needs to get cracking, is what you're saying, Adam.
Look, not
Always. What do you guys do?
when I cold call companies and ask, have you heard about the world's best marketer, George Coudounaris? No, he does an exceptional amount of work, and I've never seen anyone decipher not only his own intelligence from the conversations that we have with the market, but takes some of my almost robotic brain from how I see things on 6D planes and make that palatable to the market to meet them where they are. I think that it would be a disservice if he doesn't go down as the greatest marketer in history, but also the co-architect of us selling closed circuit selling, one as the floor, and two as obviously training other people for that to become the benchmark. So I think, yeah, he does an exceptional amount of work, and he's not just an ivory tower bloke. Because if he was, he'd probably just have an office under the Harbour Bridge, Charles, and we'd have to send him like tickets, technical requests to just like him and hear from him. But that's definitely not
To
the
his
case.
assistant,
Yeah, yeah.
of course.
Well, you make me blush, Adam. I'm here being your cheerleader, mate. And I just think what you've built is amazing. So any way I can do to help translate that to people, it's a privilege to do it because I think it's something that's needed. Charles, we are in the middle of like testing language and seeing what people understand. And something that I do like to ask people is when Adam talks about market validation, I think some of that gets lost because I think people think about it in terms of like the one-off process of validating your market before then scaling an operation. Whereas when we talk about market validation, what Adam really means is cataloging, which is an evergreen activity. I'd like to get your take on that just for some honest feedback if you're okay with it.
So it sounds to me like what you're describing is people are conflating market validation with finding product market fit, right? Like it's like once it happens, you're good and you move forward.
Mhm.
I have to imagine a lot of that has to do with the idea, like when I think of the word validation, it's binary, as in there's a pre-validation state and a post. So it doesn't necessarily give that evergreen conception that you're talking about. Whereas I like to call it first party intent signals
Yeah.
because there's already some education in the market about intent signals. And so if you talk about first party intent signals, then you have you gather them yourself. And that to me gives more of that evergreen perspective versus validation is like pre and post. Like once you're validated, like you're good.
I
Interesting.
think it. Oh, sorry, you go, George.
Yeah, I was going to say, what about the term cataloging? Do you feel like that describes the process better? What's your feedback on cataloging?
I like cataloging. There is a similar issue in the sense that people think that they're static values that you have to fill in, right?
It's dynamic.
Once you fill them out, it's done. That's the only issue I see with that.
Mm. Yeah,
Mm,
I
interesting.
think there's probably two things. Like I'm really just using the language that was obviously taught to me. But the other side of that is I think that a lot of this will be addressed through our summary document, which should be out shortly. Thanks, George. But also, I think what we should do, what I used to do, Charles, with my teams previously, is if we were selling into new markets, we would build a learning library that would become all of business developments and customer successes for those particular segments. What I
Hmm.
think we should actually make that a part of one of the chapters in the book to say this is the language that we use, this is why this is going to become universal, and this is how to use it. But yeah, as to what closing out on what you said about the validation, I think you're right. But I've always just been taught that validation was like per account, per stakeholder, not 20 hypothetical personas and we're often off to the market. But maybe that's just because how we had to do things over here in a minimized market. Every touch had to it almost had to be mission critical.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Charles. The marketer is always trying to get feedback from the market on what resonates, what doesn't, what bridges we need to build between terms that people understand now. First party intent data, I think that's an interesting one. I think marketers always think about that like a little bit differently. Maybe salespeople will think of that more like this process, but for the marketer, that's always looking at like what data are we picking up from our website, that kind of thing, like properties that we own. Anyway, I think we will keep finding that language and translating it, and appreciate your feedback so we can get as many people understanding this concept, which should be simple on its surface, right? And I think that's what this conversation keeps taking us back to, is like this should be common sense and everyone feels it,
Hmm.
but there is so much built up against it and so much that needs to be undone, and so many vested players in making sure that it doesn't play out this way. I mean, you look at like who all the education is coming from, and it's from the companies that want to keep like selling this narrative. I mean, you look at like all the education that comes out of the intent data platforms, and what's their main interest? Like, it's not for this to happen. So it's a tricky one, right? There's a lot to fight against, Charles.
There is, but it's a good fight and an important one.
Yeah. The end goal would be that I would welcome all those intent data platforms to come and learn from Chief Revenue School, and we can actually make your product be actual sticky.
I don't think you can even work that magic, my friend. That would really. There's some things that are even beyond the great Adem Manderovic. Manderovic?
Yeah, there you go. Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. The tide is turning. I think that the more people that are analytically or financially astute and look at things from a lens out perspective will be able to eventually go, we should be looking at business as a commercially viable operating system. And that's what we've built with these closed circuits, right? But until that more people have that lens, they're not going to see it. I think that Chris Walker was looking at a lot of the same type of thing before he went off and doing what he does now. But I think that there'll be a tipping point where the market will realize that all of these things make complete sense. This is how we get there. And then they're going to wonder, where do we turn? And it's probably not to the big four that are going to charge them like $1 million a year for stuff that didn't work in 1988.
I have to believe now that we're talking about it that you guys would have more success with PE and companies that are a little bit more mature, specifically because of that incentives component that I was talking about, where with a VC, you can make the argument that, hey, you guys can be more profitable and lower your costs, but they would say, Adam, I really don't care about that because I'm willing to spend as much as it takes for growth. Whereas if you go to a PE, they have a very different set of incentives where they can take the same business, really not do much in the way of increased revenue at all. But by lowering costs, they get what they need to when they sell the business out in another 5 to 7 years. So the efficiency argument, if we go back to capitalism and self-interest, may actually work better with those organizations because they actually give a damn about their costs. Whereas with VC, you're shouting into the void a little bit because even if they lose a ton of efficiency, if they get even just a little bit of top line from that, they don't really care.
Mm.
So that may be something that's interesting for you.
Yeah, and I'm just going to give you a throwaway comment that I want to get on video. A lot of those VC circles giving business to each other. Outside of those circles, no one knows who they are. It just looks like they're very busy on LinkedIn, super successful, but they can't tell you how they actually go to market because they get gifted the suite of companies from their umbrella from the same VC. When that all busts, then what? We're going to have to go back to fundamentals across the pillars of business, and this is how we do it. George, take your lawyer. I can see the stress on his face. Please don't say that.
No, I had another question for Charles, because Charles, you're so analytically minded, and I'm curious as to what your take is on the impact of AI and what it's been on Outbound for so many people. Because I kind of felt like we were starting to get to a point where the cheap spam cannons that people were building weren't working quite as much. And then in the last couple of years, AI has been like this new wave, this new promise. And is it just like a cheaper spam cannon that has further delayed people realizing the downstream commercial repercussions of everything that's happened for the last 15 years? Like, has it been more of a handbrake or a help, do you think, when it comes in the context of this conversation, Charles?
The short answer is I think you're absolutely correct. People are, from my experience, permanently on the race for silver bullets to help them hit targets that they probably shouldn't have agreed to in the first place. And what has happened is it has created the ability to put even more noise into the market, with the byproduct being people are less responsive. And so then, if you look at that feedback loop, the conclusion from the people perpetrating the spam is, I should do even more of this. And the expression from economics is the tragedy of the commons, where the incentives of the individual people involved, when taken on a macro scale, actually make things worse for everybody. So it's like, if everybody's fishing in the same lake, any one person wants to get as many fish as they possibly can. And if you explain to them, like, well, hey, like, if we all do this, then there won't be enough fish and they won't reproduce, and then no fish for everybody in the long term. And they're like, yeah, but I have my revenue target to hit this year. So screw you guys. I'm going to send as many emails as I possibly can. I'm going to use parallel dialers to completely kill off anybody picking up the phones. But before that happens, I hope that some people will pick up in the meantime. And so there's this horrible feedback loop, particularly because I spend more time with phones. But when I think of parallel dialers and the companies that sell them, I think they're some of the biggest hypocrites in Outbound because they purport to solve a problem that they profit from. And they worsen the problem by deploying their services, which then only creates more demand for their product. But if you educate buyers, and like I think part of the resistance you guys run into is what you say is dangerous for the establishment. To which I say, good, because it's good for buyers. And what's good for buyers is good for business on the whole in the long term, even if it's not good for some companies. But at the end of the day, we do what we do because there's problems that our buyers have that we benefit from if we solve as efficiently and as well as possible. And when we reach out to them to educate them on that, it is for their benefit. And if there's situations where it isn't a good fit for them, we respect that. Right. But all of that flies so contrary to the face of the establishment that, George, to your point, people are incentivized to suppress that.
Yeah, I just wonder where that leaves us, because if every channel is becoming saturated, and it seems like that's the way that we're moving, Charles, where do we go next? Does everything just go back to in-person interactions, small events? Every channel gradually becomes more and more saturated. What happens then?
I think you're probably right about that. So, an interesting statistic worth talking about is what's called phone reach. People who have a propensity to pick up their phones to unknown calls. This is really the basis of Titan X. And over time, that number has decreased, in part because of communication preferences, the availability of other channels. Overwhelmingly, if you look at the percentage of the population of the people who picked up their cell phones to an unknown call, 20 years ago, it was higher. As people have used the phone as a channel, that number has diminished, and that diminishment has accelerated with the rise of sales enablement technology. Go figure. Sales enablement making sales harder. Like, hilarious. But in any case, what you see is like, I almost think of it from a financial markets perspective, where the thing that's underinvested in has the highest return until such time that enough people invest in it that it takes out that excess return. So there's a curious tension between, I think Justin says when you zig, I zag. Everybody is sending these stupid multi-paragraph emails. You send like the one, like the two sentence like widget, right? Like a text message almost. But then if everybody starts doing that, you got to go to something different. It's understanding what channels are underinvested in at any given moment and going there until such time that people do the same thing and then you move. So it's more about being a contrarian to be able to stand out from the noise, I think is really the philosophy I have there.
You think that you'd have the advantage now then, Charles, with a cheeky comment here? You could just post people your book?
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't know if you guys, I'll give a shout out to him because he's awesome and a good friend. If you see Dale Dupree, he's all over LinkedIn, but he does like, he sends people like little trash cans with like a crumpled letter in it. So he does like the empty donut box where he's like, hey, when I was waiting for you to respond, I ate all these donuts. Like, here's a gift card, whatever, right? Just like finding ways to be creative. And I think it's so awesome that he does that and is such a service to the community when it comes to the value of thinking differently. So shout out Dale, because Dale's awesome.
Yeah. Funnily enough, Ryan and I were talking about in 2020 going back to doing like full, like even etched deal boxes by post. And people literally just fell off their chairs laughing at me. But that's the kind of stuff that we used to do, man. I think there'll be some things like that, but I think my other thoughts, George, if you want to know my thoughts, I think there'll be a slight time where you'll just like almost find company pages on TikTok and do video replies. That's what I think.
Go on, tell us more.
Like, what would that look like?
We're stitching funny things back to them to get their attention, to then want to start the conversation. That will be the end.
Yeah, I mean, you've done that before, right, Adam?
I have. Probably the biggest one was I did one on Insta stories. Like someone replied to my Insta story to do a national supply contract.
Really?
Yeah. And
was your story like business oriented, or was it like, now I just need to see a video of Adam doing TikTok dances? That's what I'm picturing.
Yeah, it was pretty bland. I think I was just talking about market conditions. But yeah, I think that all of those conversations will just shift to where you can have them on the channel where they want to be had. But we found that as well, Charles. We did our cataloging process as part of our pulse report through doing them on DMs for the people that wouldn't answer the phone.
Yeah.
And like we found that there is a certain portion of marketers that will never answer the phone. Was a funny throw at George.
That's correct.
Yeah. But they were more than happy to give their input, give their answers, and even see the outcome. So I think that there will just be more and more micro channels for a while that nothing will ever replace a live conversation on the phone or via video. But I think that there'll be some other funny ways that we can get there before it all implodes.
I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all comes back to finding those channels that are less saturated, so you get that cut through, and having the conversation in the way that that particular person wants to have it. Most marketers, you're not going to get them on the phone. Most marketers are not picking up the phone. They're just not. But text them over WhatsApp, there's a much higher percentage chance that they'll reply to you, even if they come inbound. It's crazy. I deal with it all the time.
I think as part of the cataloging process, one of the things people overlook that I know you guys don't is communication preferences. Because everybody has a different channel that they prefer to communicate with people on. And if you look at the way people design sequencers, they just omni-channel everybody, right? So the amount of waste that's endemic to that is a small example of the overall waste in most small GTM motions and even large companies. But like in terms of basic information that everybody should catalog, where is this person responsive? And then you just, respect those preferences.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. We've covered a fair bit of ground. Charles or Adam, is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered yet that you wanted to before we close out the conversation?
I'll let Adam go first.
I think we've covered everything that we set out to do, but I think that we should draw some attention to the book for Charles and Justin's benefit. So if we want to get hold of that, Charles, where's the best place to do that?
The place everybody gets books, Amazon.com, Cold Call Algo. I think we have over 100 5-star reviews, which is really awesome. It's been great to see the reception. Only note on the book I would put out is that if you look on LinkedIn, I think people are very focused on strategies, right? Like how many threads do you see of like PBOs work, PBOs don't work? Like there's all this just noise. And as a practical matter, what cold calling is from a first principles perspective, interruptive communication, i.e., most of the communication in our lives is planned. We know when we're going to be somewhere and how we're supposed to behave, the types of conversations we're supposed to have. And so we have that context. And people treat cold calling like planned communication. When what's really happening is anybody who gets ambushed by an unplanned communication attempt, their brain is so noisy. There's so much they're trying to sort through. And so all a good cold call does is establish shared context slowly and train people to have bilateral conversations. And you can use a PBO to do that. You can use a non-PBO. There's all kinds of ways. But when we were writing the book, we were thinking of sort of the unified theory of everything, right? Like, why do PBOs work? Why do non-PBOs work? What constitutes a good pitch? What doesn't? And it came back to this idea of when somebody isn't expecting to hear from you and they're in the middle of doing other stuff, the way you have to communicate with them is different than if they were having a planned sit-down conversation with you. So I'll throw that teaser out there. Read the book to find out more. George, how was that? Was that a strong marketing message?
Yeah, that was beautiful. I like it. I really like it. I think you nailed it. I think it speaks to a very immediate and urgent need that people have right now. It takes it back to the practicalities of what actually needs to be done. And the tactical side of things is incredibly important. And I think that's an important message of what Adam and I are trying to get out there as well. Like what we're trying to do with closed circuit selling is not displace everything that people have in place. It's the architecture that sits underneath. And so I think it coexists very nicely with what you do, Charles.
Agreed.
Beautiful. Anything else, Adam, before we close out?
Oh, no, that's great.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we encourage you to go and get the book on Amazon. Follow Charles Needham. LinkedIn, is that the best place to find you?
That is the place. I'm also on Substack, but you can find that through the LinkedIn page.
Beautiful. Charles, Adam, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.